John Felt here, and this is the April 21st, 2019 weekly weather briefing. Hope everyone's had a great Easter. It's been very nice weather across large parts of the nation this weekend. But this past week, that was not the case. We had quite a bit of heavy rain over a large part of the area, especially severe weather over the south central U.S., and that extended into the southeast U.S. and also up the mid-Atlantic coast. This is the time of year we do get quite a bit of severe storm activity. You can also see the far Pacific Northwest, also some heavy precipitation, quite wet week in that region. If we go back over the last 30 days, you can see a couple areas here that have been very active. The western and Pacific Northwest U.S., the south central U.S., actually the whole southern tier of the U.S., and that's somewhat of an El Nino type pattern, but it's also not. Usually this area is drier. And then also this area up here that brought more precipitation in the form of snow early in last week, and that's all melted by now, and that is resulting in inundation of fields and quite a bit of issues with agriculture in parts of the Dakotas, particularly South Dakota, smaller parts of Nebraska, along the Minnesota-Iowa line, and Wisconsin. But like I said, last week, quite a bit of severe weather on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You can see it started off in the south central U.S. midweek. The next day, more the southeast U.S., and then on Friday, well up the mid-Atlantic region, all the way up towards Washington, D.C. Now, with all the action going on as far as the rain and the snow melt, we have a lot of flooding going on, and I'm going to try to explain this a bit here. All the snow that melted very quickly over the last week is now in the river, the Missouri River, and that's coming down, but this area here didn't get much, so it's attenuating or lowering the flood crest as it comes down the Missouri. And likewise, along the Mississippi, the upper Mississippi, quite a bit of snowmelt and some heavy precipitation in this area. But again, as it comes down, it's going over areas that have had less precipitation, so you can see it's attenuating from major flooding to moderate flooding in this region here. We also have the Ohio River with some heavy rain as activated with some minor flooding. That's all combining, and it's coming down here, and it's sort of flushing this out with some very heavy flows along the lower Mississippi, and that's going to be the hot spot this week. So I think we're looking at still another week of high flows across the Missouri and the upper Mississippi from the past precipitation, and then over the lower Mississippi for both past precipitation and future precipitation. So we take a look at the entire region here. You can see the high flow situation in blue dots and black dots. We have a large part of the nation in higher flows, and that's not unusual for this time in spring. If you look at climatology of stream flow, you would probably see that late April and May is the highest time, and that's probably a good reminder for me for a post on that. Now, if we look at soil moisture here, what you can see is that the soil moisture is very high in areas of blue. Now, a couple things to bring to your attention is up here in the upper Midwest, we don't need additional precipitation. We would have enhanced runoff if we would. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is farmers really want to get into the fields at this time of year, start planting, and with fields so wet, all that snow melted, a lot of field inundation, very wet fields, so we want to dry that out. So keep that in mind as I go through the forecast part of this briefing. Also keep in mind that any additional heavy rain down here in the south central U.S. poses a vulnerability for flooding and excess runoff, because that area is also quite wet, and that's an area where we're going to get quite a bit of more rain this week. So soil temperatures have warmed up quite a bit over the middle part of the U.S. with some warmer air pushing in. And right now, this is the remnants of the system that produced all the severe storms. And if you look behind it, I talk about the coloring here is the atmospheric energy, and sort of just roughly that sort of shows where things are going to be active. And look at this, I don't see a whole lot back here, but I do see a bit of a southern jet stream here, and that's why the southern part of the U.S. is going to be active this week. But everywhere else, not much jet energy, and that might sort of hint here of a fairly quiet pattern. And in fact, if we look at the jet stream for the next 14 days, we see pretty much a west to east flow, maybe towards the end getting into a southwest flow. So that could mean as we get into week 2, an active southern branch of the jet. But overall, a west to east flow like this, I don't see a whole lot of strong impulses in here. That's a relatively quiet flow. Now we look at temperatures across the nation. I think the one change that we see here is that we see this cooler air gradually pushing down in this north central U.S. Great Lakes. And that's not what we want to see from an agriculture standpoint. The reason why is, like I said, fields are wet. We need some warmer, sustained warmer air to dry out those fields in that region. Now elsewhere, you don't see strong anomalies after the beginning of the period. You sort of see near normal temperatures, and that goes along with that zonal or west to east flow. You'd have more temperature gradient if you'd have more of a amplified flow, but with a west to east flow, you can sort of see that we get a lot of temperatures fairly close to normal. So this week, I think we have a couple spots to look at, but one in particular, I think that the main weather story this week is going to be over Texas and Oklahoma, perhaps Arkansas, Louisiana, and that is going to be the risk for excessive rainfall and flooding. Remember that in many of these spots, soils are fairly wet, especially in this area here, the eastern sections, but we're looking at several inches of rain in this region. Also, this isn't necessarily good news up here. Some moderate precipitation in areas that are already wet, which is going to aggravate the situation with wet soils. Not necessarily a real heavy rain, but we don't really need much rain at all in this area. Elsewhere, pretty quiet week. Not a lot of hazards out there, weather hazards. Southeast U.S. gets a break. It's been very active the last couple weeks. Looks like it's going to be a break, not just this week, but next week as well. The western U.S. looks very quiet, very little precipitation. The eastern, just some light precipitation. So overall, a quieter week. And if I run through the loop here of accumulated rainfall, it gives us a big picture of where the hot spots will be. Again, it shows right here in Texas and Oklahoma. It does also show over the 10-day period some problems up here. But again, everywhere else, not much precipitation. It looks fairly quiet for one of the peak periods of severe storms. So take a look at the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks here. And you can see that I think the main story here is we have some cooler air pushing into the north central U.S. We have some rain and clouds are keeping temperatures down over the south central U.S. Everywhere else near to a bit above normal, perhaps even more above normal in the southwest U.S. And the 6 to 10 day and the 8 to 14 day precipitation, look at this over the southeast U.S., a big below normal in week 2. And elsewhere, I don't see any dark green, so it looks like, other than maybe Florida, it looks fairly quiet. And you can see that on our weather hazards here. The weather hazards being heavy rain over Texas and further off to the east, so fairly quiet. So that's this week's weather forecast, weather briefing. Quieter week than the last two, and looks like really Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas are going to be the hot spots this week. Have a great week.